inflation, national debt, and why investing is no longer optional. Before we start, I want you to think about something. Have you ever felt like life is becoming more expensive, no matter how hard you work? Like salaries increase slowly, but somehow everything around you rises faster. Food, housing, electricity, fuel. Even the idea of retirement itself now feels uncertain for millions of people. And yet most people never stop to ask why. Why does money seem to lose value over time? Why do governments continue borrowing trillions? And why are more people beginning to realize that simply saving money may no longer be enough? Because hidden behind the modern economy, there is a system built on debt, inflation, and the continuous expansion of money itself. And understanding that system may become one of the most important financial lessons of your lifetime. So, in this video, we are going to explore the connection between inflation, national debt, and why investing has quietly become essential in the modern world. And trust me, by the end of this video, you may never look at money the same way again. There was a time when a single income could buy a house, support a family, and still leave enough room to dream about the future. A time when saving money actually felt safe, when people believed that if they worked hard, stayed disciplined, and put money aside every month, life would slowly become more stable. But something changed. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. Today, millions of people are working harder than ever, yet somehow falling further behind. Food prices rise faster than salaries. Rent consumes half of many people's income. Owning a home feels impossible for an entire generation. And despite years of effort, many people feel financially stuck, as if the system itself is moving faster than they are. But this didn't happen by accident. Behind rising prices, behind economic instability, behind the constant feeling that money no longer stretches far enough, there is a system built on inflation, debt, and the continuous expansion of money itself. And understanding that system may be one of the most important financial lessons of modern life. Because once you understand what is happening to money, you begin to understand why investing is no longer just for the wealthy. It has become a necessity. To understand the present, we first need to understand the past. For most of human history, money represented something tangible: gold, silver, real assets. Currencies were often linked to physical reserves, which limited how much money governments could create. But over time, the global economy evolved. Wars became more expensive, governments expanded, healthcare systems grew, infrastructure projects multiplied, social programs increased, and nations began borrowing enormous amounts of money to finance modern society. This borrowing became what we now call national debt. Today, some of the world's largest economies owe trillions upon trillions of dollars. Numbers so large they almost stop feeling real. But national debt does not simply disappear, and governments still need to fund everything that keeps a modern country running: hospitals, roads, schools, public services, military spending, infrastructure, pensions, interest payments on existing debt. And when governments spend more money than they collect through taxes, they must find another way to finance the difference. But eventually, the question becomes unavoidable. What happens when debt keeps growing faster than the economy itself? Because eventually, the bill always arrives. Governments then face difficult choices. They can raise taxes, cut public spending, borrow even more money, or create new money. And this is where inflation enters the story. Inflation is often described as rising prices, but rising prices are only the symptom. The deeper reality is this: inflation is the declining purchasing power of money. In simple terms, your money slowly buys less over time. A loaf of bread that once cost £1 may eventually cost £3. A house that once cost $50,000 may later cost $500,000. The numbers rise, but human wages rarely rise at the same speed. And over long periods of time, this changes society itself. And perhaps one of the clearest examples of this happened after the 2020 pandemic. When economies around the world suddenly stopped, governments and central banks responded with enormous stimulus programs designed to keep the financial system alive. Businesses were closing, millions of people could not work. Entire industries were collapsing almost overnight. So unprecedented amounts of money were injected into the global economy. In the United Kingdom alone, hundreds of billions of pounds were created and pushed into the financial system within a very short period of time. The scale was extraordinary. In many countries, more money entered the economy during the years following the pandemic than during many previous years combined. And while those measures may have prevented an even deeper economic collapse, they also dramatically increased the amount of money flowing through the system. Because when the supply of money grows much faster than the production of real goods and services, the value of money itself begins to weaken. At first, many people barely noticed, but inflation rarely feels dramatic in the beginning. It moves quietly. A little more for fuel, a little more for electricity, a little more for rent, a little more for groceries, until one day, people realize the life they thought was affordable no longer is. And suddenly, inflation was no longer just an economic term discussed by experts on television. People could feel it every time they opened their wallets. And perhaps the most dangerous part of inflation is that many people still believe saving cash alone will protect them. But cash sitting still in an inflationary system slowly loses value every single year. Even if the number in your bank account stays the same, its purchasing power will not. This creates one of the biggest financial traps in modern society. People are taught from childhood to save money, and saving is important. Emergency funds matter. Financial discipline matters. But in a world driven by inflation, saving without investing can become dangerous over long periods of time. Because inflation does not sleep. It works every year, every month, every day, silently reducing the value of idle money. And while ordinary people save cash, the wealthy often do something very different. They buy assets, businesses, real estate, stocks, land, infrastructure, things that tend to rise in value over time as currencies weaken. This is one of the biggest financial shifts most people never fully understand. The wealthy do not simply work for money. They position themselves to own things that grow faster than inflation itself. And over decades, that difference changes entire lives. Now, this does not mean investing is easy. It is not magic. Markets crash, economies suffer, people lose money. Fear and greed constantly move financial markets. But historically, over very long periods of time, strong assets have tended to outperform inflation. Not because investing is perfect, but because modern monetary systems are designed around continuous economic and monetary expansion. Governments want growth. Central banks want spending. Debt-based economies require movement, and inflation becomes part of the structure itself. In many ways, the financial game changed decades ago. Money sitting still began slowly losing power. Assets began absorbing more and more value, and people who understood this early gained enormous advantages over time. This is why so many middle-class families across the United Kingdom feel financially squeezed today. The cost of living keeps rising, energy bills increase, council tax goes up, food shopping costs more than it did just a few years ago, and for many young adults, owning a home now feels more like a distant dream than a realistic goal. In many parts of the country, average house prices have risen far faster than average wages for decades. A generation ago, one income could often support a household. Today, many families require 2 full-time incomes simply to maintain stability. Retirement feels increasingly uncertain. People work longer hours, take second jobs, rely more heavily on credit. And despite all the effort, many still feel as though they are working harder every year just to remain in the same place financially. The emotional impact of this is enormous. Stress, anxiety, debt, financial insecurity, quiet pressure building inside millions of households. And for many people, it creates the feeling that no matter how hard they work, they never truly move forward. But the reality is often larger than individual effort alone. Because when inflation consistently erodes purchasing power year after year, standing still financially can actually mean moving backwards. A savings account that once felt secure may no longer keep pace with rising costs. Wages increase slowly, while the price of housing, transport, food, and everyday life moves much faster. And this is why financial education matters more today than it did for previous generations. Not to create overnight millionaires, not to encourage reckless trading or gambling disguised as investing, but to help ordinary people understand the financial system they already live inside. Because once you understand inflation, you begin to understand why simply saving money is often no longer enough. Once you understand national debt, you begin to understand why governments and central banks continue expanding the money supply over time. And once you understand purchasing power, you begin to realize why financial survival in modern Britain requires a completely different mindset than it did 50 years ago. And if all of this still feels distant, consider this. At the time this video is being recorded, the United Kingdom's national debt stands at more than £2.8 trillion, a number so large it becomes almost impossible for the human mind to truly comprehend. But what is even more shocking is that the number is still rising every single second. At the current pace, the national debt is increasing by roughly nearly £6,000 every second. More than £21 million every hour, and over £500 million every single day. Think about that for a moment. By the time most people finish watching this video, the debt will already have increased by millions more. And while governments can continue borrowing, continue expanding spending, or continue creating money to support the system, ordinary people are often left facing the consequences through inflation, rising living costs, and the gradual erosion of purchasing power. This is why understanding money today is no longer optional, because whether people realize it or not, the financial system affects every part of modern life. For many people, investing still feels intimidating. The stock market sounds complicated, financial terminology sounds confusing, and fear stops millions from even starting. But investing does not always begin with huge amounts of money. In reality, many successful investors began with consistency rather than wealth. Small amounts, invested regularly over long periods of time, because time itself is one of the most powerful forces in finance. A person who understands compounding early in life may gain an advantage that no salary increase alone can easily replace. And perhaps this is the biggest tragedy of all. Most people spend years working for money, without ever learning how money itself works. Schools rarely teach it, society rarely explains it clearly, and many families pass down financial habits shaped by older economic systems that no longer fully exist. But the modern world demands adaptation. Because the reality is simple. If inflation continues, if currencies continue weakening over time, if national debt continues expanding globally, then learning how to invest responsibly may become one of the most important survival skills of the future. Not for luxury, not for status, but for protection. Protection of purchasing power. Protection of future opportunities. Protection of financial independence. And maybe this is the real lesson hidden beneath inflation and debt. Money itself is changing. The world is changing. And the people who succeed financially in the coming decades may not necessarily be the people who earn the most, but the people who understand the system the earliest. The people who adapt. the people who stop seeing investing as gambling and start seeing it as long-term ownership of productive assets. Because while inflation slowly reduces the value of money, ownership has historically remained one of the greatest tools for preserving wealth. Ownership of businesses, ownership of innovation, ownership of assets that continue producing value long after the original purchase. And perhaps that is why the gap between those who invest and those who never do continues widening across generations. The truth is, inflation is not just an economic concept. It shapes daily life. It shapes stress levels, family decisions, retirement, opportunities, dreams. And for millions of people, it quietly determines how difficult the future will become. But knowledge changes things, because once people understand how money loses value, they begin searching for ways to protect themselves. They begin thinking long-term. They begin building instead of merely surviving. And maybe that is where financial freedom truly begins. Not with getting rich overnight, but with understanding the rules of the game being played around you every single day. A game where money changes constantly, debt keeps expanding, prices keep rising, and investing may no longer be optional, but essential. Remember, the earlier people understand how money works, the more time they have to change their future. If you found this video valuable, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content exploring money, investing, and the systems shaping modern life. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss upcoming videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.